Okay, this short little video is going to be on applied ethics and moral philosophy. Okay, so it's the topic of ethics and philosophy. Alrighty. I want to start off by saying that race, tradition, nature, or the gods are less powerful than reason. The use of being rationalism, the advocacy of reason's utilization. For example, the philosophers Hume and Kant used reason to describe reason's limitations. Nevertheless, reason is the armament of ideas, the weapon employed in the conflict between viewpoints. Reasonably and responsibly used, the absoluteness of reason can settle disputes and serve as a guide to truth. The aim to think and to choose for oneself in a community is conceived as the life worth living, where it is essential that one be equipped to think fruitfully and wisely, but this requires information organized into a knowledge that has been interpreted into an understanding. This shall be done in order that the work of the past centuries may be useful to the following centuries. That children, by becoming increasingly educated, may be at the same time become increasingly more virtuous and happy. And given that empirical methods and logic are keys that unlock knowledge, the fundamental concepts of morality and justice are necessarily derived from facts about humankind's experiences, not from supposed metaphysical or theological foundations, but from scientific rational inquiry, has the aim of bringing progress in all fields while undermining the dogmas of religion along with the hegemony of priesthoods. And it can do this because of actual objective character and success, pragmatically falsifying ancient superstitions for freedom, ultimate freedom and tolerance. I want to just read this quick quote by Hegel. Universal history exhibits the gradation and the development of that principle whose substantial purport is the consciousness of freedom. Of course, we learned that the old world man in Eurasia, this is after Africa, but before coming to the Americas. We have him in Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, in China, but also known as the largest continental landmass on Earth. Eurasia is a huge continent, and it comprises all of Europe and Asia, primarily in the northern and eastern hemispheres, from Spain, and it spans from the British Isles and the Iberian Peninsula in the west to the Japanese archipelago and the Russian Far East. Anyways, I won't go into human evolution right now, but I do want to go into virtue. So we got Alasdair MacIntyre. All right, she's still alive. She wrote a book called After Virtue in 1981. We have Philippa Foot, another philosopher. She died in 2010 at the age of 90. You have Elizabeth Anscombe. She died in 2001, but she wrote a really good book called Modern Moral Philosophy in 1958. And then you have J.L. Mackie, who wrote a book on ethics called Inventing Right and Wrong in 1977. In applied ethics, what are the topics? Well, it's extremely pertinent to our times. We're talking about marriage, weapons, abortion, designed children, right? Basically like test tube babies and stuff like that, and sex dynamics, so behavior identity, discrimination, distribution of scarce natural resources, religious freedom, animal rights, assisted suicide, freedom to express oneself, humanitarian aid, war laws, human and business, and biomedical ethics. So anyways, J.L. Mackie talks about this thing called virtue ethics, and it's really about since the time of the Enlightenment, in which we were released from the chains of dogmatic slumber to religious ideological systems that told you how to behave and how you should be because of the gods or because of some transcendental force. Since we were finally able to break away from that during the Enlightenment period, we now have a lot of questions on, well, if there is no objective right or wrong, how do we then act? How do we then go about ourselves in the world to produce a perpetually peaceful society? Well, J.L. Mackie talks about this thing called virtue ethics, which is that, well, we go back to the ancient world of classical antiquity and we study the ethical philosophies of a lot of the pre-Socratic philosophers and the Socratic philosophers, those before and after Plato. And so the virtue ethics of the ancient world shall replace both deontology, or Kant being one such example, which is rule-based, and what's normally called consequentialism, which is results-based philosophical ethics of the modern world, given that the ethical debate has been resumed in the 18th century, like I said before, after more than a millennium, from the 8th century to 18th century, during which the dominance of the phenomenal ideological religion of Christianity, among other faiths, silenced the discussion of moral principles and the divine command morality of the scriptures being assumed or claimed to settle matters of wrong and right and how to live. Basically, virtue theory combines virtue, deontology, and consequentialism. Rete kai eudaimonia in Greek means excellence of character and living a virtuous life. So we're going back to starting our ethics on living a virtuous life. So virtue in the living of a virtuous life. An antidote to nihilism, egotism, and pragmatism, although those things in themselves aren't bad. Self-referential altruism, confined generosity, etc. And so what kind of person shall you be, as opposed to what one thinks they should be? And what kind of person you want to be? It doesn't matter necessarily what society thinks you should be, how you should behave. What kind of person you want to be? What kind of person you want people to look at you and think how you are? And it's a self-examination, actually. So for a cooperation as an egalitarian answer to the implausibility of universalism as opposed to an extreme individualism, which is communitarianism. So, we have arete as a work in Greek, which goes back to being honest, to having integrity, to having courage. In light of these things not existing anymore, we can still have prudence and kindness, self-restraint, self-control, temperance, a word encapsulated in the Greek word sophrosune, and a sense of justice. We have other parts of Greek ideas, such as practical wisdom, being sensible, being reflective, being mature, a unification of virtues, and eudaimonia, happiness. Dogs are happy, forests can flourish, but humans have reason and to be rational, and the equality and quality of reason equals the good life. So man has the ability to use its reason. Humanity has the ability to use its reason to better not only each other, but also for the betterment of other species as well. So I hope you take this in consideration. I hope you think about what it means to be ethical. I hope you dive into some really good books, so maybe some ancient history books, and maybe some books on ancient authors or from the ancient authors themselves, who were extremely virtuous in a time where, although people believed in the gods, the intellectuals of the day really knew that it was a bunch of ludicrous nonsense. So I really hope that you really start to think about what does it mean to be virtuous. I surely have, and I hope you will as well.